The house used to echo with laughter, the kind that carried from room to room, even when the television was off and the day had been long. But lately, silence had settled in like a thick fog. It started subtly, a missed dinner, a quiet shrug when asked about his day, a door closing a little too softly yet firmly enough to say, "I need space." Her son, Ethan, had always been talkative, his world an open book of school stories and teenage dreams. Now that openness had vanished, his eyes lingered on the floor, and his words had become short, clipped, like he was measuring each one before it left his mouth. She noticed it first during breakfast. The clinking of his spoon was the only sound between them. He stared into his cereal, not eating, not speaking. She tried to break the silence. "You seem tired lately, honey. Everything okay at school?" But all she got was a mumbled "yeah" and a nod that didn't convince her at all. It wasn't just tiredness. It was something deeper, something fragile. When she reached for his hand across the table, he gently pulled it away, pretending to adjust his sleeve. The gesture cut deeper than she expected. In the evenings, she would pass by his room, hear faint music or the soft buzz of his phone, and hesitate before knocking. Sometimes, she would open the door just enough to peek in his back to her, shoulders slumped over his desk, the blue glow of his computer painting shadows on his face. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but emotionally, as though carrying a weight too heavy for his young frame. The mother in her wanted to push the door wide open, to demand what was wrong, but the fear of hearing the answer kept her rooted to the spot. Family dinners, once filled with laughter, became rehearsed performances. Her husband talked about work, she asked polite questions, and Ethan just nodded, fork scraping his plate quietly. His smile when it appeared seemed borrowed, a courtesy more than an expression. Even the dog sensed it, resting its head on Ethan's knee, as if trying to absorb whatever sadness lingered around him. One night, she caught him staring at a photo on the mantelpiece, the three of them at the beach last summer, smiling beneath a sunset. His jaw tightened and he turned the frame face down. At first, she told herself it was just adolescence, a phase, a mood, the pull of growing independence. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't that. This was something unspoken, something simmering quietly in the corners of their home. She began replaying recent moments, conversations, arguments that maybe lasted too long, or words that might have reached the wrong ears. The unease grew. The distance was no longer something she could ignore. Every closed door, every unfinished sentence, every quiet sigh felt like a question waiting to be answered, and she was terrified of what the answer might be. That night, the house felt unusually still, as if it was holding its breath. Dinner had been quiet again, just the scraping of cutlery and the occasional cough breaking the silence. When she gathered the plates, Ethan stood abruptly and mumbled, "Mom, can we talk?" His voice trembled slightly, and before she could respond, he turned and walked to his room. She followed, confused and uneasy. The door closed behind them with a soft click, a sound that seemed to separate them from the rest of the world. He didn't sit down right away. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, his reflection barely visible in the dim light. She waited, her heart pounding, unsure if she should speak first. When he finally turned around, she saw tears glistening in his eyes. "I heard something," he began, his voice cracking under the weight of the words. "I didn't mean to. I was looking for Dad the other night." Her stomach tightened. A strange, cold realization began to creep through her veins, but she stayed still, afraid to interrupt. Ethan took a shaky breath. "You were in the kitchen. I heard you talking. You said you didn't know how to tell him. You said you made a mistake." His words came out in fragments, heavy and trembling, each one slicing through the air. She felt her throat close, her breath catching in her chest, The room seemed smaller now, the air thick and suffocating. Ethan wiped his eyes roughly, his hands shaking. I didn't want to believe what it meant. I told myself maybe you were talking about work or something else. But then I heard you crying later that night. I heard you say you wish he'd never found out. The tears she had been holding back spilled over, but she tried to keep her face steady. Her son looked broken, not angry, but deeply wounded, as if the foundation beneath his life had suddenly shifted. He sank onto the edge of his bed, clutching his hands together. I just don't understand why you didn't tell me, he whispered. We always tell each other everything. The innocence in his voice shattered her completely. She wanted to reach out, to hold him, to explain, but words felt meaningless in that moment. His trust had been pure, untouched, and now it was fractured by something he was too young to carry. The silence between them stretched painfully long, filled only by the sound of their uneven breathing. When she finally knelt in front of him, he flinched slightly, but didn't move away. His eyes, red and tired, met hers, a reflection of confusion, disappointment, and something else she couldn't bear to name. You're still my mom, he said softly, his voice trembling but sure, but I don't know how to look at you the same way right now. The words fell like stones between them, final and unchangeable. The weight of them pressed on her chest, stealing her breath. In that moment she realized that some truths, once spoken aloud, could never be taken back, and that forgiveness, if it ever came, would be slow, fragile, and painfully earned. The following days moved in slow motion, like walking through water. Every sound in the house seemed louder: the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the hallway floor. Ethan didn't slam doors or raise his voice. Instead, he carried his silence like armor, moving from room to room without looking at her. He still came down for meals, still said good night, but his words were stripped of warmth. When their eyes met, his gaze flickered away too quickly, leaving her standing in the echo of what used to be comfort. She found herself studying him constantly, the way he avoided sitting beside her, how he lingered longer outside after school, pretending to text someone while she watched from the kitchen window. One afternoon, she heard the soft thud of his backpack on the floor and peeked into his room. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, staring at the same beach photo he'd turned face down days ago. This time, he had turned it upright again. The faintest tremor of hope stirred in her, but she didn't dare interrupt. The sight of him there, shoulders hunched and eyes glossy, broke something inside her. That night, she wrote him a letter. No explanations, no justifications, just an apology. She told him she was sorry for the cracks she'd caused, for the pain he never should have carried, for the tears she had heard him try to hide. She slipped the folded paper under his door, unsure if he'd even read it. The next morning, it was gone. No mention of it, no confrontation, but that evening she found the letter back on her nightstand, and with 4 words written in messy pencil at the bottom, "I'm trying, Mom." Her knees went weak, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself cry freely. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a fragile thread of connection, stretching across the distance between them. She started to rebuild their bond slowly, not through grand gestures, but through presence. She waited up for him when he came home late, left notes in his lunchbox that simply said, "Love you," and asked small, gentle questions about his day, never pushing too hard. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, she found him sitting in the living room, sketching quietly. Without a word, she sat across from him, holding her cup of tea like a fragile secret. After a long silence, he looked up. "It still hurts," he said quietly, "but I don't want us to stop talking." The tears came uninvited, but she managed a shaky nod. "Neither do I." The moment felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, faint, uncertain, but real. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in the form of late, late-night talks, hesitant smiles, and moments of shared quiet where words weren't needed. Slowly, the air in the house began to change. Laughter didn't return immediately, but the silence softened. Trust, though bruised, began to breathe again, fragile, but alive.